Hello, my sweet and precious students. Welcome back. We are going to be talking, this is for my Algebra 1 class in the Saxon book, the 3rd edition. I always forget that part. We are on lesson 27. We are going to be talking today about distributive property and simplifying decimal equations. I talked a little bit about simplifying decimal equations before by multiplying by 10 or 100 and moving those decimals across all of your chunks, but we're going to just do one that do some that are a little bit more elaborate. All right, so first things first, if you're following along at home, I'm on page 113, and I'm looking at example number 1. We're going to be using our distributive property now for just a quick reminder. Here is the first example that they give you. Just a reminder, there's two different ways to solve this. The first is do what is in the parentheses first. 7 plus 2 would give us 9. And then 4 times 9 would give us 36. I had to think about that for a minute. Another way of doing that would be 4 times 2 plus, that's this, right? Plus 4 times 7. I like to call the distributive property the rainbow property because you draw little rainbows, right? 4 times 2 gives me 8 plus 28 right there. So we get 36, right? Same thing that we got on the last one. All right, so that's just two different ways of doing it. So let's talk about how we are going to complicate up, that actually was an example 1, I'm sorry. We're gonna complicate up the distributive property, however. All right. So within these parentheses, you'll see I have 2 chunks here, right? There's a chunk here and a chunk here. What we're gonna do, and then on the outside I have this chunk here, right? They're multiplied, so they're together. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take this chunk and multiply it by this, and then we're going to take this chunk and multiply it by that guy right there. Just a friendly reminder, on your notes, make sure you write this down. x2 times x3 equals x to the 5th power. What we're doing when it looks like this and we're multiplying, we're actually adding those exponents. When it looks like this is when we multiply x to the 6th power. Okay, so, and the reason why that is important, guys, if there is not an exponent shown, it's just like a coefficient. If there's not a coefficient or a number in front of a variable shown, then it's 1. Same with the exponent. This x has an exponent of 1. This y, exponent of 1. This z, exponent of 1. So when we take this chunk here and we multiply it by this guy here, we get x to the 1, but we don't usually write that. y1, y2 gives me y to the 3rd, okay? Now we're going to minus x to the 1 times x squared is x to the 3rd. y1 times, there's no y's over there, so we'll just put that down in here. And then z1. Now, it's not typical to write the 1 as an exponent, so you need to rewrite it like this. I don't care if you do that on your notes, but when you go to write your answer, I will mark it wrong if you have the 1 there, just because it doesn't look appropriate. It's the same with putting a 1 in front of a variable. You can do it in your notes, but then when you clean it all up to show your answer, make sure that it's not there. So this would be our answer using that distributive property. Let's take a look at the next guy. And it might help if I show it out like this. So example number 2 is 4xy to the 3rd, x to the 4th, y to the 1, but I'm not going to write that in there, minus 5x. So we're going to take this chunk right here, this guy, and we're going to multiply it by this chunk here, and then we're going to multiply it by this chunk here. When we do that, we start with our numbers first. 4 times, there's no numbers, well there are, it's a 1, right, because it's a silent number. 4 times 1 would give us 4. And then x to the, remember that's to the 1 power, times x to the 4th is going to be x to the 5th. Y third times y to the 1 power will give us y to the 4th. Okay, minus 4 times 5 gives us 20. X to the 1 gives us x squared, y to the 3rd. And you have just done the, this is example number 2, by the way. You've just done the distributive property. Distributive property, yay. All right, so let's talk about example number 3. All right, you guys, so we are going to do another example. Let's see, example number 3. We have ooh, they're trying to trick you here. Do you notice how this chunk is at the back here? This guy right here? They're trying to trick you. So rewrite the question by putting that, I call those the loose numbers that are outside of the parentheses. Write those at the front. because this will be a physical clue to you that you're gonna need to distribute this chunk to this chunk to this chunk, right? So this chunk to this chunk, that's gonna be 2. Now, guys, I like to put them in alphabetical order. So I know I have x squared times y times a times y. I'm gonna start with my a. So I got a right there. Then x is gonna come next, and it's just those 2 x's that I got. And then a y and a y gives me y squared. Minus, because this is a negative, right? 2 times 4 is 8. And then x squared and y1 and y5 gives me y to the 6th. Y to the 6th. So that's the distributive property for those guys. Let's see about number 4. Example number 4. We've got 8m squared x 5m to the 3rd x minus 3x to the 5 to the 5th, I should say, minus 2. Okay, here's one where within those parentheses, you'll notice that we have 3 chunks, 1, 2, and 3. That means I'm gonna underline these chunks here. We're gonna be distributing this chunk to this first one, the second one, and the third one. So start with the numbers. 8 times 5 gives me 40, right? And I like alphabetical order. M2, M3 gives me m to the 5th. X to the 1 gives me x squared. Now, this is a negative and this is a positive, so we know our answer is going to be a negative. Okay, we have 8 times 3 is 24. M squared, there's no m's over here, so just m squared. X to the 5th, I hope I wrote that down right. Yep, x to the 5th, x to the 1 gives me x to the 6th. Okay, now we're going to take this chunk and multiply it over here. Positive and a positive is a positive. 8 and 2 is 16. M squared. X to the 1 gives me x squared. So that's the distribution property for that guy. All right, so we'll talk about multiplying decimals next. All right, you guys, so now we're gonna talk about simplifying some decimal equations. And I kind of talked about this in the last one, but we're gonna go a little bit more in depth about that. All right, so for example number 5, we have this guy right here, 0.4 plus, and again, it's written in the book with 0.4. I don't write that because I'm lazy. You don't have to put the 0 in front. So 0.02m equals 4.6. Although sometimes it helps people when they're lining up. So if it helps you, then definitely put a 0 there. All right, guys, so what I talked about last time was, look at all these chunks, 1, 2, 3 chunks, right? We want to see how many digits they are behind decimals. This is 1, this is 1, this is 2, which means what we need to do is move all of the chunks 2 times. So this guy, we're going to go 1, 2, and we'll end up with 2m. But if I move the decimal 2 times here, I have to move the decimal 1, 2 times here, which makes this 40. I got to throw a 0 in there to make that. This is going to be 1, 2, which makes this 4, 6, 0. So all of those have been moved over. Now, again, we still have those 3 chunks here. I want to get this chunk all by itself, which means I need to move this guy over. So minus 40, minus 40. When I do that, this cancels out and we bring this down to m equals 420. 420. We're going to divide this side by 2, divide this side by 2. These cancel out. M equals 210. 420 cut in half is just 210. All right, so let's do example number 6 with that same method. Okay, example 6. I'm so sorry, I just noticed like my ring light reflects back there. Sorry guys, but then you wouldn't be able to see my pretty face if, you know, my ring light wasn't there. And it looks like I have a tree growing out of my head. It's cool. This is Hank. Hank and I are BFFs because I haven't killed him yet. He's like 2 years old, so turns out I'm responsible, guys. All right, next one, 0.02. Oh wait, 2k plus 0.02 equals 4.02. 4.02. Personally, looking at this one, I'm gonna just subtract this straight off the bat, right? Because it's the opposite here. That makes our lives a lot easier, because if we do that, this becomes 0.002k equals, these guys cancel out, equals 4, right? Because 0.02 or 2 hundredths minus 2/100 gives us 4, right? But on that same token, so if I want to deal with this, getting rid of these decimals, words are hard today, apparently. But if I want to deal with getting rid of these decimals, what I have to do is 1, 2, 3 here, which means, guys, again, we're mathematicians, we're lazy. If a decimal is not shown, it is at the end. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3 here, put a decimal. So what we end up with is 0, 0, 2, which is just 2, okay, equals 4, 1, 2, 3 zeros need to go there. Divide this by 2, divide this by 2. These cancel out, k equals 4,000 cut in half is 2,000. 2,000. Now, straight up, I mean, at the beginning, you probably could have just multiplied each one of these chunks if you wanted to, but if you can identify something that's a little easier to deal with, that's a good way of dealing with it. All right, guys, so for the practice problems begin on page 114. It's A through F. Go ahead and get started on those by pausing the video and then doing the work and then coming on back. So we get x, y squared, y 2p minus p. All right, so we've got this chunk here, this chunk here, this chunk here. We're going to take this chunk and multiply it by that chunk. We're going to do it in alphabetical order. So I see there's a p here, so we're going to do p, and then we have an x, and then we have y2, which gives me y to the 4th. All right, minus, we have a p here and an xy. We're going to do a p here, and then x, y squared. All right, for b. We have another one where it is xy minus x is 2xy. Okay, what we're going to do is take this chunk and we're going to rewrite it 2xy, because that is a visual signal for us to use that rainbow distributive property, right? We're going to take this chunk and multiply it by this chunk and multiply it by this, being careful with that negative sign in the background, right? Or in the back here. 2 times, and again, the coefficient here is 1, so just 2. X times x is x squared. Y times y is y squared minus 2, and then x and x gives me x squared times y. Okay? Good deal. That was for B. So let's take a look at C now. For C, we have 3x p to the 3rd. P to the 5th minus x squared p to the 8th. All right, so we've got 8 chunks there. I gotta cross my legs. Sit with my legs crossed for whatever reason, more comfortable. All right, this chunk here, this chunk here, this chunk here. We're gonna take this chunk, multiply it by this chunk, multiply it by this chunk. So first things first, we're gonna deal with our numbers here. 3 times, and again, the coefficient here is 1, it's just 3, right? We're going to do these in alphabetical order, so it looks like I've got some p's, so I'm going to gather up my 5 p's here, my 3 p's here. That gives me p to the 8th times x minus, we're making, because this is a positive and this is a negative, right? Deal with the numbers 3 and over here is a 1, so 3. And then p to the 3rd and p to the 8th gives me p to the 11th. X to the 1, x squared gives me x to the 3rd. Excellent. Speaking of x. Excellent, good work. That's D, or that's E, sorry, C. Now we're on to D. All right, for D, guys, we're gonna do 2x squared, m squared minus 4m. All right, again, we're gonna take this chunk and multiply it by this chunk. Then we're gonna take that chunk and multiply it by this chunk. So dealing with our numbers first, 2 and the coefficient here is a 1, so nothing changes, just 2. Then we're going to deal with our letters in alphabetical order. I have m and m. That's m to the 4th. And then the x squared, I have that. We're going to put that right there. Positive times a negative is a negative. 2 times 4 is 8. This is going to be m squared, and m to the 1 gives me m to the 3rd. Don't forget that that's a 1, right? And then x squared. Good. All right, that's D. Then we've got 2 other additional equations to solve. So we have E here is 0.08x minus 0.1 equals 16.7. Again, this one has 2 digits behind the decimal, 1 digit, 1 digit. So we got to go at least 2. So we go like this, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's going to be 8x minus 1, and then I had to go an extra spot, so that's a 0, equals 1, 2 gives me 1670. Okay, we want to get this chunk by itself, which means we need to move this chunk over. So we're going to do plus 10, 8, x equals 1680. Now again, I don't care if you use a calculator, just know that on some tests you're not going to be allowed to. So if you don't know how to do something, make sure you let me know so that I can give you a hand so that you're not caught off guard on a test. We're going to divide this by 8, cancel out, divide this by 8, and I get x equals 210. 210, that was for E. All right, one more, guys. Great patience. So for F, we have 0.7m plus 0.6m equals 3.4. So for each one of these chunks here, there's only one digit behind the decimal, so this is going to be fairly easy. Move it over once, move it over once, move it over once. 7m plus 6m equals 34. 7 and 7 is 14, so this is going to be 13m equals 34. Divide both sides by 13. 13. These guys cancel out. M equals, now remember, normally this would be 34 over 13, as m equals 34 over 13. But remember, this equation started as a decimal, so let's end it as a decimal. On your calculator, 34 divided by 13 is 2.62. Guys, make sure you're rounding appropriately. And typically when you're rounding, you want to round to the nearest hundredth, which is the second decimal place. So if you look at that third one, that's a 5. That means we need to round that 2 or that 1 up to a 2. So it's going to be m equals 2.62. All right, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, great work. I'm excited to see you in class and see how all of this is going. We'll go from there. Thanks, guys.